Lyria's starship, the Aegis Veil, faltered in the endless void of space. Its once reassuring hum was now a staccato sputter, each beat driving home the urgency of her situation. The ship's AI spoke in a measured tone, its calm demeanor belying the chaos unfolding. Critical systems failure detected. Descent trajectory imminent. Lyria's translucent, multi-jointed fingers danced across the console, her shimmering digits blurring as she attempted to stabilize the craft. But the damage was too severe. With a violent shudder, the ship broke from its course, drawn into the gravitational pull of a blue-green planet she had been observing from afar, Earth. The descent was nothing short of catastrophic. Flames licked the hull as the Aegis Veil ripped through the atmosphere, plummeting toward the surface. Lyria fought to control the spiral, but all she could do was brace for impact. When the vessel finally crashed into a dense, forested area, the resulting cacophony was deafening. Smoke billowed from the wreckage as the mangled ship groaned in protest. Staggering out onto alien soil, Lyria's legs trembled under her weight. The ground felt strange beneath her, soft and damp, clinging to her scales. Her breathing was labored, her translucent skin refracting the sunlight that filtered through the trees. She stood frozen, overwhelmed by a symphony of unfamiliar sounds. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, water babbling in the distance. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and life, so unlike the sterile metallic tang of her ship. Her heart raced as she assessed her surroundings. Lyria was Meladrin, an explorer sworn to observe without contact. Interaction with human beings was strictly forbidden. Their worlds, their very beings, were fundamentally incompatible. Yet here she was stranded. Adjusting her chameleon-like cloak to blend with the shifting hues of her iridescent scales, Lyria set about constructing a temporary shelter. She scavenged what she could from the wreckage, combining fragments of alien alloy with forest debris. Days blurred into each other as she toiled, her focus unwavering. But she couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. On the third day her fears were confirmed. Lyria crouched by her ship, examining the damaged energy core, when faint footsteps rustled behind her. She turned sharply, her luminous eyes scanning the underbrush. A young boy, no older than 10, emerged from the trees. His disheveled hair stuck out at odd angles, his wide eyes a mix of fear and wonder. "Are you an angel?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Lyria froze, unsure how to respond. Her kind had inspired myths on distant worlds, their radiant forms mistaken for celestial beings. But she wasn't here to perpetuate such illusions. "I am not an angel," she said, her voice a blend of melody and steel. "You should not be here." The boy hesitated, taking a cautious step closer. His gaze drifted to her legs, elegantly scaled, their iridescence shimmering like liquid opal in the sunlight. Without warning he reached out to touch them. Lyria flinched, stepping back instinctively, but his fingers brushed her leg. A surge of energy jolted through her body, not painful but deeply unsettling, as if the contact had exposed something intimate and sacred. "Why did you do that?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Her glowing eyes bore into him. "Why do you humans always touch without asking? Is it because you seek something? Do you think you'll find answers by invading my space?" The boy's cheeks flushed crimson. He stammered, his embarrassment palpable. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're so different." "Difference does not grant you the right to invade," Lyria replied, her tone softening as she saw the sincerity in his eyes. "You must learn to ask before you act." The boy nodded, shame flickering across his face. "I'll remember. I promise." Before Lyria could respond, distant voices called the boy's name. His head snapped toward the sound, his expression torn. "I have to go," he said. "But I won't tell anyone about you. I swear." Lyria watched him disappear into the trees, her chest tight with unease. The encounter, though brief, left her shaken. She couldn't afford to be discovered. But the boy's innocent curiosity was just the beginning. Over the following week, more humans found her. Some were drawn by the rising smoke of her ship, others by the whispers spreading through the nearby town of a shimmering figure in the woods. Each encounter followed the same pattern: curiosity, awe, and an insatiable need to touch. Lyria's patience wore thin. Their fascination with her form, especially her legs, felt invasive, predatory even. One day, as she knelt by a stream washing soot from her hands, a group of teenagers approached, their laughter shattering the forest's tranquility. "Hey, alien lady," one boy called, his tone mocking. "What's with the shiny legs? Are you hiding something under there?" Lyria rose to her full height, her towering figure silencing their snickers. I do not hide, she said coldly. But I do not welcome your touch. Another boy smirked and stepped closer, his hand reaching toward her. Relax. We're just curious. Enough. Lyria's voice rang out, her iridescent form glowing brighter as her frustration peaked. Why do you humans always touch without consent? What do you hope to find? Do you believe the answers lie in my flesh? The teenagers recoiled, startled by her outburst. Muttering amongst themselves, they retreated. One girl hesitated, casting Lyria an apologetic glance before following the others into the forest. Lyria sank to the ground, trembling. She had come to Earth as an explorer, not a spectacle. Every interaction stripped another layer of her dignity. That evening, as the sky blazed with hues of orange and pink, Lyria sat by the stream, her reflection distorted in the rippling water. She felt a profound loneliness, a longing for her own kind. Are you all right? The voice startled her. Lyria turned to see an older human woman standing a few feet away. Her silver hair glimmered in the twilight, her posture calm and non-threatening. I saw what happened today, the woman continued. You seem weary. Lyria hesitated, studying the woman's lined face. She detected no malice, only quiet understanding. Your people do not understand boundaries, Lyria said finally, her voice heavy. They touch as if it is their right. Why? The woman sighed, lowering herself onto a nearby rock. Sometimes it's curiosity. Sometimes it's ignorance. Touch is how many of us connect. But I know that doesn't make it right. Lyria looked away, her gaze distant. It feels invasive, as if they seek to strip me bare. I can see how it would feel that way, the woman said softly. Perhaps they don't realize the harm they cause. For a while, the two sat in silence, the forest alive with twilight sounds. When the woman finally stood, she offered a gentle smile. If you ever need help, I live nearby. My name is Miriam. Lyria watched her leave, the woman's kindness stirring something unfamiliar within her. Trust was a luxury, but Miriam's words lingered. As the stars winked into view, Lyria made a silent vow. She would endure, find a way to repair her ship, and leave this intrusive world. But she would also teach its people something they seemed to have forgotten: respect. Chapter 2. The Cost of Curiosity. The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy, bathing the forest in a pale golden glow. Lyria emerged from her makeshift shelter, her translucent skin shimmering faintly in the soft light. The air was heavy with dew, and every sound, birdsong, rustling leaves, the distant gurgle of a stream, felt amplified, alien. Her thoughts lingered on Miriam. The human woman had been unlike the others. Her presence had not felt invasive, nor had her words carried the weight of ignorance. Could this woman truly understand? Was it possible to find an ally in this hostile, unrelenting world? But Lyria's focus soon returned to her ship. The energy core remained unstable, its faint hum growing weaker with each passing day. If she didn't find a solution soon, the core would fail entirely, leaving her stranded indefinitely. She crouched near the vessel, her fingers deftly inspecting the intricate lattice of alien circuitry. Then she heard it again, a faint rustling in the underbrush. Her luminous eyes snapped toward the sound, scanning the shadows. Who is there? She called, her voice sharp. From behind a cluster of trees, a young man stepped forward. He was taller than the boy she had encountered days earlier, perhaps in his late teens. His posture was tense, his hands raised slightly as if to show he meant no harm. I didn't mean to startle you, he said, his voice calm but cautious. I heard the others talking about someone out here. I wanted to see for myself. Lyria straightened, her gaze narrowing. And now you've seen. Leave. The young man hesitated. Wait. I'm not like them, he said quickly. I'm not here to bother you or touch you or anything weird like that. I want to help. Lyria tilted her head, her iridescent scales catching the sunlight in a cascade of shifting colors. Help, she repeated, skepticism heavy in her voice. Yes. He glanced at the wreckage behind her. I don't know what you're trying to fix, but I work with machines. I can help you, if you'll let me. Lyria studied him, her gaze piercing. Humans had already proven themselves to be unpredictable and invasive. Could she risk letting one of them near her ship? And yet, her repairs were progressing too slowly. The thought of spending another week, or month, on this planet made her stomach churn. Your name? She said finally. Ethan, he replied. And yours? She hesitated. Lyria. Ethan took a cautious step closer, gesturing toward the ship. Can I take a look? No, her voice was firm. Not yet. He stopped, hands still raised. Fair enough. But if you need tools, I can bring them. Spare parts too. We have scrap yards in town, old cars, broken electronics. I can find what you need. Lyria's translucent fingers curled into fists at her sides. The truth was, she did need materials she couldn't easily fashion from the forest or her wreckage. But trusting this human felt dangerous, reckless even. Still, her options were dwindling. Bring the tools and leave them at the edge of the clearing, she said at last. Do not linger. Ethan nodded. Got it? I'll be back by tomorrow. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving Lyria alone once more. That evening, as the forest bathed in the cool hues of twilight, Lyria found herself restless. She replayed the encounter with Ethan in her mind, dissecting every word, every movement. Humans were unpredictable, their motives often veiled in layers of deceit. Yet something about Ethan's demeanor, his cautious sincerity, made her pause. Perhaps he truly did want to help. But as night fell and the stars emerged, Lyria's thoughts turned darker. What if Ethan returned with others? What if this was a trap, a way to expose her to the larger human population? She couldn't shake the memory of the teenagers mocking her, their laughter grating like static in her mind. The risk was immense. Lyria spent the night perched atop a large rock near the edge of the clearing, her glowing eyes scanning the darkness for signs of movement. She clutched a jagged piece of ship metal in one hand, its edges sharp enough to serve as a makeshift weapon. The forest was alive with nocturnal sounds, the hoot of owls, the rustle of unseen creatures in the underbrush. But no humans came. By morning, exhaustion had settled heavily on her shoulders. She was about to retreat to her shelter when she heard footsteps, careful, deliberate. Lyria tensed, her grip tightening on the shard of metal. Ethan emerged from the trees carrying a large backpack. He stopped several paces away, setting the bag on the ground and raising his hands in a gesture of peace. I brought what I could find, he said, stepping back from the bag. I didn't tell anyone. Lyria approached cautiously, her eyes flicking to the bag. She opened it with deliberate care, her hands moving with a practiced efficiency. Inside, she found an assortment of tools, wires, and small mechanical components. Some of the materials were crude, but they could be adapted for her purposes. This will suffice, she said, her tone neutral. Ethan gave a small smile, relief washing over his features. Good. If you need anything else, just let me know. As he turned to leave, Lyria's voice stopped him. Why are you helping me? Ethan paused, glancing over his shoulder. Because, if I was stranded somewhere, I'd want someone to help me too. His words lingered in the air long after he disappeared into the forest. Over the next few days, Ethan returned periodically, always leaving supplies at the edge of the clearing and keeping his distance. True to his word, he never lingered, never pried. Lyria worked tirelessly on her ship, using the materials he provided to make slow but steady progress. Yet despite her guarded nature, she couldn't ignore the growing sense of gratitude she felt toward him. He was different from the others, less intrusive, more thoughtful. But her caution remained. One evening, as she tested a repaired section of the ship's propulsion system, she heard a commotion in the distance. Shouts, laughter, the unmistakable sound of multiple humans approaching. Her stomach dropped. She scrambled to conceal herself among the trees, her heart pounding as a group of 5 humans stumbled into the clearing. These were not children or curious teenagers. They were adults, rough-looking, their voices loud and boisterous. See? I told you there was something out here, one of them exclaimed, pointing at the ship. Another man laughed, slapping the first on the back. Looks like you weren't crazy after all. Lyria's breath caught in her throat. These men weren't here out of innocent curiosity. They reeked of opportunism, their greedy eyes scanning the wreckage. Maybe it's government property, one of them said. Or maybe it's worth a fortune, another replied. Either way, we're taking a closer look. As they approached the ship, Lyria's mind raced. She could not allow them to interfere, not with her ship and not with her mission. Steeling herself, she stepped out of the shadows, her iridescent form glowing faintly in the dim light. Leave, she commanded, her voice reverberating through the clearing. The men froze, their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm. One of them recovered quickly, a cruel grin spreading across his face. Well, look at that. The alien's real. The tension in the air crackled like static. Lyria's hands clenched into fists as she prepared for what might come next. Chapter 3, Boundaries and Bridges. The clearing was heavy with silence, the rough-looking men standing frozen as Lyria's iridescent form emerged from the shadows. Her translucent skin shimmered with an unearthly glow, and her eyes locked onto theirs, unblinking and sharp. I said leave? Her voice carried a commanding resonance that made the air seem colder, the forest quieter. The man with the cruel grin stepped forward, his bravado hiding a flicker of unease. And why should we? You think you can scare us with your shiny skin and fancy ship? We're not leaving until we've had a closer look. Lyria didn't move, but her presence seemed to grow, her scales catching the faint sunlight in waves of refracted color. The effect was mesmerizing and unsettling. Your curiosity does not grant you the right to invade my space. Leave now or face the consequences. Another man snorted, pulling a crowbar from his bag. Oh yeah? And what are you gonna do, glow us to death? Before the words had fully left his mouth, Lyria raised a hand. A faint pulse of energy radiated outward, rippling the air like heat waves. The crowbar jerked from his hand, flying several feet away to land with a dull thud. The men stumbled back, eyes wide with fear. She's dangerous, one of them hissed. The cruel grin was gone now, replaced with a mask of apprehension. The leader raised his hands in mock surrender. All right, we'll go. No need to get weird about it. But as they turned to leave, one of the younger men lingered, his gaze fixed on Lyria's legs. The iridescent scales fascinated him, shimmering like liquid starlight. Without thinking, he reached out. Lyria moved faster than any of them could react, her arm shooting out to grab his wrist. The contact sent a sharp jolt through his body and he cried out, stumbling backward. Do not touch me, she said, her voice low and cold. I am not yours to claim, nor yours to explore. If you ever return, I will not be so lenient. The young man scrambled to his feet, terror etched into his face. The group fled into the forest without looking back, their shouts and heavy footsteps fading into the distance. Lyria stood alone in the clearing, her chest heaving as the adrenaline coursed through her. Her hands trembled, but her resolve remained firm. She had defended herself, her ship, her dignity. But the encounter left her drained, a hollow ache settling in her chest. That evening, as the stars began to dot the sky, Ethan returned. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, his face pale as he saw the signs of a struggle. The trampled grass, the scorched air where Lyria's energy pulse had rippled. What happened? He asked, his voice laced with concern. Your people, Lyria replied, her tone weary. They came to take what does not belong to them. To violate what they do not understand. Ethan winced, guilt flashing across his face. I'm sorry. Not all of us are like that. I know, Lyria said, her gaze softening. But enough of you are. Enough to make me question why I should stay. Ethan hesitated, then stepped closer. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone. If they come back, I'll help you. Lyria studied him, the sincerity in his voice, the way his hands remained at his sides, unthreatening. You've done enough, she said quietly. Your kindness has been unexpected. But this is not your fight. It doesn't matter if it's my fight, Ethan argued. It's the right thing to do. A faint smile touched Lyria's lips, though it was tinged with sadness. Your world is not ready for someone like me, Ethan. Perhaps it never will be. But I will remember your kindness. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, a low hum emanated from the ship behind her. Lyria turned, her eyes widening as she saw the energy core flicker to life. It's ready, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Ethan's expression shifted, a mix of relief and sorrow. You're leaving? Yes. She looked back at him. My mission was never to stay. I was sent to observe, to understand your world from a distance. But now I see there is much more to learn. About your people, about your boundaries, about the way you touch what you cannot comprehend. Ethan's shoulders sagged. Will you ever come back? Lyria hesitated. Perhaps. When your people are ready. When you've learned to ask instead of take. The hum of the ship grew louder, the faint glow from its repaired systems casting strange shadows across the forest. Lyria stepped toward the vessel, then paused, turning back to Ethan. Thank you, she said softly, for showing me that not all humans are the same. Before he could reply, the ship's hatch closed behind her. A moment later, the vessel rose into the air, its engines humming with renewed life. Ethan shielded his eyes as a brilliant light engulfed the clearing, the ship ascending rapidly into the night sky. He stood there long after it had vanished, the forest returning to its natural state. The hum of insects, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, all felt strangely louder in her absence. Ethan finally turned and walked back toward the town, his thoughts heavy. He knew no one would believe him if he told them what had happened. But he also knew he would never forget the alien woman who had taught him a lesson far greater than curiosity. Far above the planet, Lyria watched Earth shrink into the distance. Her heart was heavy, but her resolve was firm. There was hope for humanity, buried beneath layers of ignorance and arrogance. One day perhaps they would learn. And when they did, she would return. For now, she vanished into the vastness of space, leaving behind a world forever changed, even if it didn't yet know it.